All right, you want to continue on this? I want to bring in former Deputy RCMP Commissioner Pierre-Yves Bourduas. So, PY, you were listening in on the testimony today. What stood out to you?
Actually, for me, this commission is once in a lifetime, as far as I'm concerned, as a former police officer, and I would imagine also Canadian citizens paying attention to what is being said there, because it's quite revealing as to some of the challenges that law enforcement officials, and especially senior officials, have when briefing elected officials. And they're coming from different point of view. One has to consider, for instance, the director of CSIS, David Vigneault, that clearly indicated to the government prior to the invoking of the Emergencies Act that, in his opinion, the opinion of the service, according to the legal framework of their service, that didn't constitute an emergency because it didn't cause any major threat of violence to persons and property, espionage, having a foreign authority trying to overthrow the government. So therefore, looking at his prism, he clearly indicated to elected officials that didn't constitute an emergency. And likewise, what's interesting is that Commissioner Lucki at the time also failed to actually speak overtly at the cabinet meeting, but in her note clearly indicated that the Emergencies Act, according to her, were not needed. The juxtaposed to all of this, the fact that when on February 18th and 19th, the police agency moved in to remove the occupation, they use part of the Emergencies Act to their advantage in order to clear the downtown Ottawa. So all in all, it's from my own perspective, utterly fascinating.
You know, when you were here last, it was the day, I believe, former Ottawa Police Chief Peter Slowly testified. And you said one of the things that stood out for you was just how bad communications were within the Ottawa police force. And here we have Brenda Lucki saying she never spoke up at a meeting on the 13th of February, the day before the 14th, when they invoked the Emergencies Act, didn't tell them there was a policing plan where she could use this, may have told a chief of staff, may have put it in writing, but didn't say it directly to the minister. So what do you make of these communication breakdowns between the National Police Force and the national government?
Well, not only the National Police Force and the national government, but also there was a segment this afternoon at the commission, whereas Commissioner Lucki didn't recall conversation with the Commissioner of the OPP, Carrick, in relation to operational plans. So there was obviously a breakdown in communication with various levels of policing agencies, and at the core of this, the discussion around the future of Ottawa Police Service Chief Slowly at the time. So therefore, this miscommunication from my own opinion, kind of served the purpose of the government invoking the Emergencies Act, because ostensibly from an elected official looking at all of these miscommunication are, in their mind, looking at this and thinking like we need to provide law enforcement agencies additional tools, because obviously this miscommunication and the occupation over a 3-week period is not yielding any positive outcome. So therefore, let's provide the law enforcement agencies with additional tools, because obviously they just can't get together and do the job properly.
So what's your sense of this? I mean, all the police forces have largely testified that there was still a policing solution. They didn't need the Emergencies Act. They haven't exhausted all policing options. But yet it went on for 4 weeks. I mean, what's your sense? Do you buy it when the police officers say, we could have gotten this done without the Emergency Act? Or is that a bit of self-serving, after-the-fact assessment from people who don't want to admit they couldn't do the job? What is it?
Well, having been, police officer for over 33 years, you always like to think you have a solution to any operational challenges. But if you listen carefully to both Commissioner Lucki and Deputy Commissioner Duhem today, they both recognize that this particular situation in downtown Ottawa was something they've never encountered in their collective policing experience. Hence the reason why the challenge from a law enforcement perspective was huge, and hence the reason why they needed to work together. But obviously, there was a great deal of miscommunication, and also a clear intel showing that there was a threat heading towards Ottawa, and for some reason ignoring all of the signals and red flags that should have prompted a police response upstream from where the convoy showed up in our national capital region.
You said off the top the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to see the communication challenges between police and politicians and all of those issues. We're going to hear from the politicians next week. You know, we're going to hear from Marco Mendicino, Minister Blair, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. What are you looking for when the politicians who actually made the decision to invoke this act take the stand?
Well, it's going to be interesting purely from a law enforcement perspective and their own perspective as to the level of threat. And of course, I would suspect that the line of questioning will be very much in line with the level of threat, their own perception of the threat versus what was presented to them from the director of CSIS and what the commissioner of the RCMP indicated to the elected official, and at times failed to indicate some of the intel that was available to the RCMP, where she should have spoken up. But so hence the reason why it's going to be interesting to see from elected official perspective, what did they know and what did they do about it?
Okay, PY, always good to get your insight. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. Former Deputy RCMP Commissioner Pierre-Yves Bourduas.